Welcome to Diasporaa, the show where we share the remarkable stories of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. I'm your host, Aditya Mehta, and each week we sit down with individuals who have made the journey over and explore their experiences, their challenges, and their triumphs. We delve into their unique perspectives on adapting to a new culture while staying connected to their roots. Today we are joined by Mohit Joshipura, a doctor and chief medical officer at OpenLoop, which is a telehealth services provider. Mohit is originally from my hometown, Bombay, and moved to Houston as a teenager. He has since spent time in various parts of Texas and is now settled in the Dallas-Fort Worth area since 2012. I know Mohit from my undergrad days at UT Austin. We're both proud Texas Longhorns, and we met through the Longhorn Cricket Club, and I've been friends ever since. And with that, Mohit, welcome to the show.
Aditya, thanks for having me. Really happy to see you continuing to expand into various aspects of society and community. And obviously, real pleasure seeing you in person a few weeks ago.
Yeah, right on. So my first question is it Bombay or is it Mumbai?
Yeah, look, I mean, officially, obviously, the name has been changed to Mumbai, but for me, it is Bombay. I know the name Bombay has pre-colonial Portuguese and
Yeah,
obviously, and even intra-colonial British roots.
yeah,
And those who are very much centered in their Indianness have preferred the term Mumbai now. But for me,
yeah,
mostly for nostalgic reasons, the name that comes to mind first is Bombay.
yeah. I speak Marathi, I say Mumbai. And I speak any other language, I say Bombay.
Yeah, I think that is what would roll off my lips naturally as
Yeah.
well. I agree with that. Yeah.
Are you still in touch with Marathi as a language, though?
From a comprehension standpoint, I'm probably close to 100%. That being said, from a spoken language standpoint, my proficiency has probably dropped to sub 50%.
Yeah. So my Marathi was getting rusty. And then we moved to Seattle, and our neighbors, I like to say they are photo negative because they are Marathis from Gujarat and we are Gujaratis from Maharashtra.
Oh,
So he
wow.
speaks Gujarati with a Baroda accent, and I speak Gujarati with a Saurashtra/Bombay accent.
Wow,
So
that's fascinating.
yeah, so his family has kind of kept my Marathi fresh in that sense.
Wow.
I usually ask my guests that their hometown, if it were a North American city, what would it be? But we have had many guests from Bombay. So the whole comparison with New York, LA, that's been done. So I'm going to ask you the reverse. If Dallas were an Indian city, what would it probably be?
It's a good question. I wasn't expecting that one, but I would say probably Pune is my closest comp
Yeah,
because, the whole Mumbai Pune comparison is similar to the Houston Dallas comparison in Texas,
yeah,
at least, in the sense that Houston is the older, more established, the more sprawling city, the more bustling city. But, Dallas is newer, but is also now in its own right, a bustling metropolis. So
yeah.
similar to that, similar to what Pune has become in Maharashtra in the last 20 odd years since I've left. So
That's a
I'd say Pune is the closest comp.
that's a great comparison. So far, we've had Dallas being compared to Ahmedabad because it has a potty-mouthed neighbor to the south in Surat, and as you have Houston, and then you have Austin being Baroda, slightly more polished, smaller, and then Rajkot would be San Antonio, like nobody cares about,
that's
or El Paso for that
that's
matter.
right. That's right.
So
That's
that
right.
was the comparison. Do you know where your last name came from? The Joshipura last name. What are the origins of that name?
Yeah, so Joshi has its roots in astrologers and Brahmins or
Yes.
Brahmins. And then Pura, to my understanding, is a town or a settlement. So Joshipura is actually a town in the Junagadh, Saurashtra part of Gujarat.
Oh wow. Okay.
And we come from a class of Gujaratis known as Vadnagra Nagars. But
Mm-hmm.
basically, from the Saurashtra part of Gujarat, my mom's family hails from Rajkot side, and then my dad's family hails from the Porbandar side.
Oh,
So even though I'm full through and through Saurashtra, I've actually never spent time beyond
yeah.
visiting Gujarat. I've never lived in Gujarat.
Yeah. Same.
Only lived in Bombay.
Yeah. So a running theme of this show is that with people who I've known for most of my life or most of their lives, I still find out something new about them. So
Yeah,
I didn't know this about you. So it's nice to learn something new.
right, right.
So it's an occupational slash locational last name,
You're
both
correct.
in combined in one.
You're correct.
Interesting. So in Bombay, we were born and brought up there. So this was the 90s. Bombay was a very interesting place in the 90s. Any standout memories for you from your time in Bombay?
You know, I mean, this will be a recurring theme of this show or this podcast, but I mean, most of my life, and I consider it a privilege, right? That most of my life centered around sports and sports fantasies and sports aspirations.
Yeah,
So I spent hours and hours at Shivaji Park playing tennis
yeah,
back when tennis, in India was still a rather aspirational sport and out of the reach of many.
yeah.
I was very lucky to be able to participate in tennis at a decent level there. And of course, cricket. So my life in Bombay was basically a rinse and repeat between school, tennis, and cricket,
Yeah.
and in that cycle. So almost all of my standout memories revolve around sports, and not only playing sports, but for the longest time until I gained a semblance of maturity, kind of aspiring to only become the next Boris Becker at that time or whatever. One of those people I looked up to, and I retain some great memories from
Yeah.
those periods.
And even when we played cricket, you were the more proper cricketer, I guess, in terms of your shots, the stroke play, and all the terms that you would use while batting. I distinctly remember all of those. So we were like the gully cricket offshoots, and you were like the proper, Lord's cricket ground kind of
Yeah,
guy.
I mean, I appreciate that, but the reality of that situation is that I was probably behind the times even then. Forget now in terms of the style of play.
Yeah.
Even then, things had started to evolve away from, people,
Yes.
from test cricket into more white ball cricket. And now I mean, even though test cricket has kind of retained its rightful place in the cricketing ecosystem,
Yeah.
from a watchability standpoint, people mostly care about white ball cricket.
Yeah. What prompted the move to the States?
Yeah, I've talked a lot about this with my family. And when we moved, I was 14. My older brother was 24, 23, 24. He's 9.5 years my senior. And my dad was about 52. Mom was about 48. So quite late, if I may say so, in their journeys, and quite unusual for people to move to the United States in their 50s and late 40s.
Yeah.
And so the only reason it happened is really twofold. And this is serendipity in many ways. My Masi, my mother's younger sister, who had been residing in Pennsylvania since the 1970s, had filed for a green card for us, many years ago.
Yeah.
And it got processed in the late 90s, early 2000s, at around the same time when my father, who had one job, literally one job for his entire career, I shouldn't say at one company, he was with Siemens, the German multinational, first in India, then in Germany, then in India again, and then finally was offered a transfer to the US. And that transfer offer and the processing of the green card happened at the same time. Otherwise, my family had really no intentions to move. But because those two things
Right.
happened, and being this proverbial land of opportunity, my parents took a risk to kind of relocate at that age, mostly for us. And we feel very fortunate to have lived the life we've lived ever since.
Yeah, this family sponsored green card, at least in Seattle, isn't much of a thing. Like, you don't see Indian or South Asian families that have been here for 40 years. I have several relatives as far west as Chicago and Texas who have this path. But it feels like the population here is much newer. They've come in, the 2000s, 2010s for tech jobs. And I'm seeing a trend of a lot of those going back because they've never really assimilated to the point where they have roots set up here and extended families here.
Right.
And as India grows and salaries grow, their logic is, life there isn't bad if you're making
You're absolutely right.
100,000 US. And probably the assimilation is limited to a Costco membership, right? So
Right.
it's much easier for them to just move back.
Yeah, especially as you get older, right? I mean, especially as you get older and establish life and you're married, maybe have kids, assimilation at that point becomes even harder than if you come here during college or high
Yeah.
school, or, I came during high school, which brings with it, honestly, its own set of unique challenges. As you might imagine, But from a more holistic perspective, assimilating when you are 35 is a much different ballgame than when you're 15.
Having come to the US for undergrad, I see the difference between me and my friends here who came for their masters, even though they've been here continuously since masters, and I had a 10-year gap in India in between.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still more assimilated, and I still have more American habits and low context cultural attributes than they have, even though total years are more.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's because when you're younger, almost a forced assimilation, right? In the sense that when you're in high school and college, you almost have no, depending on where you go to high school and college, you almost have no choice but to assimilate. But when you're older, you often, at least in today's America, in big cities, you have the choice to kind of be more insular if you choose to be. Yeah. And so that might be one of the reasons.
I think the university is when you make the most friends the quickest, and you have most rapid changes to your life in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah.
So not only did I come when I was 17, but I was here for 4 years in that college environment. And, if you remember my friend Curtis Dusek, who would take me to all these football games, right? Yeah. So it was like a hyper assimilation exercise, I think in my case especially. Yeah. And that's kind of why I have more local habits, I would guess.
Yeah, for you, I guess it was baptism by fire in college. For me, it was baptism by fire in high school.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate in the sense that the two main things that allow for a quicker assimilation, in my opinion, at least in retrospect, number one is language, obviously. And number two is having some sort of overlapping habits or overlapping interest with the local community or your friend circle.
Yeah.
And in my case, fortunately, English was not a problem. In a sense, it's almost my first language.
Yeah.
And I played tennis since I was 3 years old in Bombay. So, that transition or that stepping stone, both of those stepping stones really, in a sense, accelerated my assimilation journey at a very formative time in my life.
So let's talk about those early days in high school. So you landed, you'd probably, had you been to the US before as a visitor, or was it your first time?
I had been to the US twice before, if I recall correctly. Twice before as a visitor. Once in 1994 was my first trip, and which I think, if I recall correctly, was actually my first trip on an airplane and my first trip ever abroad.
Yeah.
In 94 when I was 9. And then the second time was in 99. So I'd been to the US twice before as a visitor.
But it would still have been some sort of culture shock in high school, right? Anything that stood out from those?
Yeah, look, I went to a high school in suburban Houston that was, if I remember the demographic breakdown correctly, approximately 67-70% Caucasian. But the other 30% was a rather diverse mix of African American, Hispanic, South Asian, Southeast Asian students. And so it was a fantastic, almost a perfect mix of people with whom to assimilate. And I distinctly recall that the other people of South Asian origin, or a couple others who had moved from various parts of India at around the same time as I did, unfortunately had a much harder time assimilating because of aspects related to the ones I just spoke about a few minutes ago, specifically language.
Yeah.
And in my case, it was much less of an uphill battle, even though there were the expected kind of hiccups here and there, trying to, you're very impressionable at that age. And so I made it a point to try and lose my accent, for better or for worse. I made it a point to try and lose my accent as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And so obviously there were hiccups with that. The classic humorous Indian kind of transition point is not being able to differentiate between V and W.
Yeah.
So for me, initially it was Wednesday and vending machine, as opposed to Wednesday and vending machine. So that I always got picked on for things like that. But aside from that, there were luckily no major hiccups for me. And again, I feel very fortunate about that.
A common theme among our guests who have come at that age is that they would stand up and talk when talking to the teacher.
Yeah.
Did you have that problem as well?
No, because I think in my case, I was so impressionable, and again, for better or worse, was so keen on fitting in at that age. Not fitting in with the bad stuff, but fitting in with the good stuff.
Yeah.
or with the kind of balanced stuff,
Yeah.
neutral stuff, that I was very observant about how
Got it.
people would do certain things. There's
Yeah.
things, even things as nitpicky as how they would kind of twirl their fingers to open the locker in the high school,
Mhm.
which backpacks they would use, and all sorts of kind of small things like that. I would try and make it a point to kind of assimilate with, or fit in with, rather quickly.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things I didn't have any incidents with, but I was around a few people who did.
Yeah.
So,
Was the decision to go to UT pretty straightforward one?
yes and no. Yes, because it was, from an educational standpoint, one of the more preeminent institutions in the public university, maybe the best public university in the state of Texas, and
Yeah.
one of the best in the entire country. So from that standpoint, no, it was not a difficult decision. However, I played tennis at a decent level in high school, was offered a D3 tennis scholarship to Dallas, which I ended up rejecting. And for a few weeks there, I was, in two minds about whether to take it or leave it. But by then, I think I had recognized, and when I talk about semblance of maturity, I think that semblance of maturity had hit me by then, that even though I might enjoy playing tennis at a competitive level in college at a D3 school, I was never going to become the next Federer or the next
Yeah.
Becker. And so if the goal was to take my educational journey or non-sporting journey farther than my sporting journey, from a practical standpoint, it made sense to go to the better educational institution at that
Sure.
stage. And so that's why I chose UT Austin. And obviously, in retrospect, no regrets, because from a different standpoint, I played sports at a different level at UT,
Yeah.
as you very well know. And
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that you caught wind of some kid from Bombay setting up a cricket club, and that's why you chose UT.
Yeah. That kid being the kid on the other side of the screen here right now.
Yeah. Let's take a short break now. And when we come back, let's talk about that whole Longhorn Cricket Club experience. So, yeah, stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
For 75 years, the Muscular Dystrophy Association's voices have thundered through the halls of Congress.
For 75 years, we've willed the impossible into existence.
For 75 years, the MDA community has pushed the science,
shifted the narrative,
and established the field of neuromuscular medicine.
And until that day, when this is all a thing of the past,
You couldn't stop us if you tried.
Join us and celebrate 75 years of breakthroughs at mda75.org.
Are you ready to discover remarkable stories of resilience and cultural connection? This is Diasporaa, a show sharing the journeys of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent now building their lives in North America. Inspiring, insightful, and always engaging, Diasporaa offers a unique perspective on the immigrant experience. Join me, Aditya Mehta, my guests, on the Diasporaa Show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here on KKNW.
Be sure to support the sponsors of your favorite shows on Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Diasporaa on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. We're talking to Mohit Joshipura, MD, and now a telehealth chief medical officer. Before we get back to talking to Mohit, I want to take a moment to remind you to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can find all our episodes in video format there. So, Mohit, let's talk about the beloved Longhorn Cricket Club. How did you come across the club, and what was your experience like?
When I came to UT, my closest friends were a few people from high school. And I stayed at this off-campus dorm known as Castilian, as you would recall.
I remember. West
right
24th.
That's right, and Guadalupe. Very close to campus, but just one block off.
Yeah.
And when I came to UT, I obviously came with blinders on, in the sense that I was singularly focused on the academic aspects. By then, I knew I kind of wanted to do medicine, and knew that I'd find extracurriculars that I would enjoy and people that I would enjoy doing them with.
Yeah.
But not in my wildest dreams did I think I would come across an activity and a set of people, both of whom would remain with me literally for the rest of my life. And I think it was a chance, whether it was one of those online things or whether one of those postings in Jester or word of mouth, that I heard about this cricket, 8-on-8 cricket tournament that's
Yeah.
going to happen at the intramural fields off of
Yep.
51st. I didn't
Yeah.
have a team. I think I just showed up, may have become part of a random team.
Yeah.
And if I recall correctly, the opposing team was the team that you had organized in the very foundational years of LCC. At that
Yeah.
time, I didn't even know if there was an LCC.
Yeah.
But, some of the folks we know very well, like you and Janesh and Rohan, and all these people were part of that team. And I
Right.
happened to play against you guys. And then after that game, I think you and I spoke in detail about our background, our common
Yeah.
or common origins in Bombay, some of the common people we knew in Bombay.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we struck a chord, struck a friendship. And also I learned about your plans to kind of take this whole thing one step further.
Yeah.
The
So,
rest is history.
so to pause there, I routinely come across local Americans here who are amazed that in a country of billion people, when two Indians meet here, they find somebody in common in India, when they may not even know anyone from their high school in Seattle. Why do you think that's the case?
I think at its core, it's because of who we are as a people. We tend to gravitate a lot toward social interactions and maintaining social interactions and cultural interactions. No matter what background we come from, no matter what religion or anything like that
Yeah.
we come from, we tend to put a lot of prominence and a lot of importance on those aspects. And I think that is at the core of that kind of uncanny streak with Indians and South Asians in general,
Yeah.
which is we'll always find the least common denominator or some sort of common thread that exists between two people, almost as a way to break the ice.
Yeah, as a way to break the ice, definitely. I was walking down Speedway once and I saw someone who lived in my building in Bombay. And our friend Curtis was just amazed. He was like, how is that even possible in a city of 25 million? I'm like, no, but it's many cities of 1,000 people each,
That's
right?
exactly right.
Yeah. So going back to LCC, I realized that I did a lot of smart business decision making without knowing I was doing it at LCC. So, what you would call word of mouth marketing, or what you would call audience personas, and, having targeted segments. If you look back, we had something for every type of cricket fan. So we had match screenings, we had the volleyball gully cricket tournament, we had a tape tennis tournament, we had a league games, we had, and if you didn't know, we had cricket coaching. So we were offering something for everybody, and without really explicitly knowing what that was or what impact that would have.
Right.
And I think when I graduated, we were probably one of the largest recreational clubs at UT in terms of membership, and probably the biggest university cricket club in the US,
Right.
going by the sheer numbers. So it was definitely a fun period of my life. And I think because I was one to 2 years ahead of all of you guys, my friendships weren't as cemented as you all are between all of you. But selectively, I've managed to keep in touch with a lot of the
Yeah,
people.
but I mean, it's one of those things, Aditya, where you establish something and you establish a foundation and you move on without fully even knowing the impact that foundation has had on other people. And in this case, I mean, for me, personally speaking, and I suspect if you spoke to any of our other common friends, some of them might say the same thing. Those memories and those years and those friendships have been foundational
Yeah,
to our growth as people. For now, what 2008 to now was 17, 18 years down the road.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think even you would have imagined, I mean, when you established LCC, it was probably not with the intent of having people, maybe you had the vision of popularizing the game and familiarizing people to the game and establishing a mini community. That's understandable and common. But I don't think you would have even imagined that, 15, 20 people would become lifelong friends through this.
No, I went to the Indian Cultural Association when I was new, and I said, hey, I have this experience of organizing, college competitions, inter-college stuff, and I'd love to volunteer. And I kind of got shooed away saying, this is America, this is not India, things are done differently here. So I said, to kind of heck with it, I'm just gonna start my own organization. And there was already the Indian Student Association. So there was not really room for one more unless I went niche.
Right.
And I said, if I'm going niche, then it has to be as broad and niche as possible. And so I said, why not move away from the cultural aspect altogether and look at cricket?
Yeah.
And that's how it was formed. And the first year or two, we helped all the other associations with their cricket tournaments for free. We didn't take any of the share of revenues or anything. Learned the whole thing. And then when we put on our tournament, it was much better organized. It was much more professional. And by the time I think I graduated, everybody else's tournaments had been decimated because ours was just that good. So definitely not any kind of grand vision per se, but just a genuine love of cricket as a sport. And I've always been a super connector for the rest of my life after that, be it in my business school, be it in Vancouver. I built a new immigrant platform, which has about 7,000 members at its peak. So I've always enjoyed being the guy who brings everyone together and not necessarily being the leader. Like, I had no leadership skills to be captain of the cricket team, but I became one by accident and that showed. But the goal has always been to bring people together and see what comes out of that exponential network.
Yeah, and I think you would remember that it's not only people like you and me who gravitated toward the club, and not just the sporting aspect of the club, but also the cultural and social aspect of the club. But there were people who had zero familiarity with cricket, who were born and raised in the US. Indian, and if I recall correctly, some non-Indians as well.
We had a Trinidadian team that participated regularly.
Right. And so that shows you that the connection aspect went well beyond a pure love of the game.
Sure. Yeah. It was one of the few places where India beat Australia consistently.
Yeah, that's right.
That was our tournaments.
Yeah, back in those days, it was a rarity.
Any high points in all your cricket club memories? Like anything that really stands out? And a particular...
I still joke about it, but it's not really a joke in the sense that if people were to ask me, even today, the top 3-4 memories of my life, I think one of them would still be, it would likely always be, winning a division championship in a leatherball league with that group of people in 2007 and coming close to a second one in 2008 before I graduated.
Yeah.
And that sense of routine, that sense of camaraderie, that sense of, the kinds of unintentional learnings that come from those events is only something you can look back upon and connect the dots on. I mean, it's never something you recognize in real time.
Right.
But looking back, I cannot even begin to tell you the number of times I have been able to connect lessons learned from LCC league experiences to aspects related to both personal and professional life moving forward. So undoubtedly for me, a standout memory would be being able to be part of, teams that won a championship in league cricket.
I had graduated by then. In the first season, we came to the semifinals where we lost in the semifinals, and we had beaten in our first match ever a team called the Excaliburs.
I remember.
And so Dhaval Doshi was on the show a few episodes ago, and he was the bowler in the last over in that game. So we had quite a good time reminiscing about it. But one thing that really moved me afterwards was that I got one of the little trophies from your win in that league tournament. And you guys gave me one trophy, even though I was not part of the team for the entire season. I still have that trophy at home. So that was definitely a special moment lived through your memories.
Vicariously. Yeah, of course. I mean, I distinctly remember multiple people by then, appreciating the kind of foundation you had laid so that dozens of people, probably hundreds of people after you, and really not only after you, after us, were able to participate at a decently competitive level in league cricket in the Central Texas region.
I was in Austin in 2013, in late August, early September, and I saw a Longhorn Cricket Club table at the West Mall, and the sheer pleasure I took out of going up there and being like, hey guys, I was the one who started this. And this banner, I ordered this banner with my own money. They're still using that old banner.
That's unreal.
So it was, 5 years after I'd graduated, but it was a very special memory attached to LCC for sure. So after LCC, after UT, what drove your decisions towards medicine and the traitor you became by going to Texas Tech?
Yeah, I distinctly remember I was applying to med school,
Yeah.
and I was kind of on my own, maybe with Maharshi Patel, who maybe, if I recall correctly, Maharshi Patel was doing medicine, was applying for medicine, and he was my batch, as opposed to people like Janesh and Rohan, who were a batch junior to me.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, but or maybe Maharshi was part of that batch as well. But in any case, I may have been on my own. But I distinctly remember we were playing gully cricket in Spanish Oaks behind Jester. And in medicine, in medical school, they have what's known as match the match, which means you find out through an online system based on some very complex algorithms if you are going to be accepted to one of the Texas schools, and if so, which one.
Yeah.
And there is a pre-match process where people who are highly qualified get chosen. I was not one of those people, so I had to
Sure.
wait for the regular match process. And I distinctly remember looking it up online when we were playing at Spanish Oaks and finding out that I had matched at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
And I almost was disappointed. Instead of being,
Yeah.
Grateful and relieved
Yeah.
that I'd
Yeah.
made it into medical school, which is a fairly competitive process at its baseline even.
Yeah.
I remember complaining to Janesh and Rohan saying, man, I have to go to this West Texas town, who knows what exists there, what doesn't exist there, after an experience at a place, a cosmopolitan, multicultural
Yeah.
haven like Austin.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be all alone in Lubbock, farther away from my family home in Houston. And
Yeah.
I was quite nervous. And so my initial reaction was one of disappointment. But I didn't choose Texas Tech. The stars chose us. And again, no regrets. I made
Sure.
some good friends at Texas Tech as well. And med school, as people might have told you, your medical friends might have told you, medical school is one of those places where beyond a point, it doesn't matter whether you're in New York or Vegas or
Yeah.
Podunk, Texas, or wherever you are.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because the vast majority of your time is in your living room or bedroom, reading or library reading
Yeah.
and studying anyway.
Yeah.
And I grew to like Lubbock. My main problem with Lubbock at that time, luckily it's not a problem today. My main gripe with Lubbock for all 4 years of med school was that it did not have a Chipotle. It only had a Freebirds.
Yeah.
And
Which is not the same.
and you would know the amount
Yeah.
of time and money we have spent on that Chipotle on Guadalupe
Yep.
next to the co-op. My
Yeah.
goodness, I really missed it for those 4 years.
Yeah.
So that was my main problem. Clearly a very first world problem, but
Yeah.
that was my main problem with Lubbock.
So when I went to the London Business School, there was a Chipotle right next door. And for a moment, my wife Prachi actually thought I take academic decisions based on proximity to a Chipotle. And, I mean, there's been one around me wherever I go. So what do I do?
Right.
But this college rivalry, right? It really stays with you. Even if you don't know how to play football, you're not much into it. I was walking downtown Hong Kong, like the central district of Hong Kong with my wife. This is probably 2013, 14-ish. And I see someone with a Texas A&M lanyard. And I happen to be wearing my burnt orange Bevo t-shirt. And the smack talk I gave that guy, poor guy, he was just minding his own business, standing on a street, having a smoke or whatever. And my wife was like, wow, that was vicious. And I'm like, no, but he understands why I did it. So that just kind of stays with you no matter where you go. And a common theme of this show also is, I've had people from Ohio State and Michigan,
Right.
and I talk smack to everybody on
Right.
all of these shows, as much as I would to a Chennai Super Kings fan.
Right,
So,
of course. Yeah, one thing that is a small regret of mine is that I went to probably one of the most fun and celebratory college football environments in
Yeah.
America. But for all 4 of those years,
Yeah.
I had this preconceived notion, which has completely changed since then, about American football. In my mind, I was like, this is all brawn and no brain.
Yeah.
You have to be 6'6" and 300 pounds to play this. And these are all robots that are controlled by people on the sideline. and it's useless. I have no interest in it. There's a ton of money going into the sport. It's basically funding the entire institution. And I had all these preconceived notions about American football, and I regret that I never really enjoyed, to the extent that I should have, the college football environment and culture of UT Austin. And only after I left and I roomed with a diehard football fan in med school during my first year, did I truly come to understand the nuances of the sport. And once I was one of those people, as you know, that once I get into something, I get into it at an academic level almost.
Yeah.
And so once I got into that sport, I became a big fan. Obviously, by then I was in med school, so I kind of enjoyed the Texas Tech UT rivalry at that time.
Sure.
And now I'm a big football fan, a little bit more NFL than college, but I still follow both very closely.
Yeah.
One of the small regrets I have till date is that I never enjoyed UT Austin Longhorn football when I was a Longhorn myself.
Yeah. I mean, now you would have to buy the regular passes and not the student passes. But thankfully, you can still enjoy it. I'm planning to take my son to Austin for a football game next year when he's almost 7 and a bit older. So on that note, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk to Mohit about his transition from medicine to telehealth and what he's doing now and what advice he has for someone moving to the States today. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
Statistics show that roughly 20 veterans die by suicide every day in the United States. Canines for Warriors is the leading nonprofit organization providing highly trained service dogs to veterans with PTSD and other invisible wounds of war. Backed by scientific research, Canines for Warriors has transformed the lives of more than 1,000 veterans, helping them reclaim their independence. To find out more, please visit caninesforwarriors.org.
Hello, I'm Chris Erdman. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, I sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs, creative minds, and game changers to uncover the real stories behind their business. On my show, Made of More, we explore the challenges that they've overcome, the breakthroughs that they've celebrated, and the mindset that drives them forward. If you're ready to unlock your full entrepreneurial potential, Made of More is the show for you, because here we know you are made of more. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW.
No other station delivers this much variety. Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Diasporaa on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from South Asia. We're talking to Mohit Joshipura. He's a telehealth senior executive and fellow sports fanatic, and my dear friend from UT. So before we jump back into the conversation, if you like listening to our show, please consider following us on Instagram or leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. So Mohit, after you completed your residency, you were working as a practicing doctor. What prompted a move out of that a few years later?
I went to a residency, UT Southwestern Parkland Hospital in Dallas, that was known to churn out people who were highly specialized in cardiology or critical care or GI, whatever it might be. And I was one of the few who purposely chose to not specialize. And I think I did that for two main reasons. One is I kind of enjoyed in medicine the idea of knowing something about everything as opposed to knowing everything about something.
Sure.
Which
theme of my life, but
right, which is a little bit uncommon and in a world that is becoming more was starting to become more and more specialized. And the second reason was that I knew that I would likely end up taking the path less traveled in medicine, and I would not end up becoming a career practicing physician. I already knew that in residency. And so for those two reasons, I stayed a general internist, or a GP as they call it in the UK or other parts of the world. And so I practiced, you're correct. I practiced in traditional practice in the Dallas area for about 6 years. I held a panel of 2,000 plus patients across that time frame, but then made a pivot into digital health. And I did it because I wanted to have a more macro impact on healthcare, take a more unique lens to healthcare delivery and healthcare operations. And it ended up being a fortuitous time to make that pivot, because when I made the pivot, it was in early mid 2020 is when I first started, envisioning it. And that was the time when COVID was
Yeah.
about to hit American shores.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing good about that time in America, obviously, or the world.
Yeah.
But for me personally, that was a silver lining for making that move, because there was a time when telehealth and digital health as an industry completely entered its boom phase or bubble phase. And so that kind of gave me a tailwind to kind of really propel myself into that field of medicine. And, fortunately, for a while, I was always asked, I still am asked, do you miss seeing patients all day, every day? Initially, it felt weird to say no. I almost felt embarrassed or ashamed a little bit to say no, because, what kind of doctor are you if seeing patients is not your first love, professional love?
Yeah.
But in my case, I've come to embrace the fact that I like to be in an industry that allows me to keep one foot firmly planted in clinical aspects of healthcare, but then expand my horizons into other aspects of healthcare, such as, digital delivery, strategy and operations, leadership, things of that nature. So for the last 6 odd years across 3 different startups, all at different stages in their life cycle, all the way from Series A companies to companies that went IPO, I've learned a lot. And I've been now at my current company for the last 3 years, scaling that digital health business.
What does a chief medical officer do in the context of the overall business?
Mainly overseeing all things clinical. Now, what that could mean, or what that does mean, is ensuring, basically my role sits at the intersection of 3 different, sides of the triangle. Clinical integrity is the first one. Operational efficiency is the second one. And then business profitability is the third one. And my job, in a nutshell, is to triangulate and ensure the growth of each of those 3 sides of the triangle, but without bending or adulterating the clinical integrity side. That is where my role sits. And so we are involved on the clinical staffing side. We're involved in clinical tech and software. We're involved in licensing and credentialing. We're involved we're a B2B business. So I engage both internally with clinicians. We have a large clinician pool. I engage internally with cross-functional colleagues who are not of clinical backgrounds. Right. And then I also engage externally with clients who are both clinicians and non-clinicians, whether they are consumer health brands, whether they're insurers, whether they're big box retail, basically anyone who is looking to build or develop a digital arm to their clinical business. Yeah. We provide a full stack, white labeled service on the back end for them. And so that's in a nutshell what my role entails.
So for the layperson, if I have a doctor who I'm going to do a virtual visit with, the website that I log into, which has the Zoom-esque screen where my doctor comes in and it's encrypted, secure space, that's kind of part of the infrastructure that you would provide.
That's part of the infrastructure that would be embedded into that overall experience for that client, yes.
Yeah, interesting. Apart from the point you mentioned about impact at scale, what is it that you love the most about what you do?
Doctors have this reputation of being, again, very insulated in their understanding of the world. Yeah. And I don't blame many of them, because the nature of their educational and professional journey demands that they take a very singular, hyper-focused approach to their craft. But in my case, as I said again earlier, I wanted to expand my horizons beyond clinical practice. Yeah. And roles like this, I still write clinical protocols. I still provide clinical guidance to the entire pool. I'm still discussing clinical aspects of programs and processes, both internally and externally at my job. So as I said, I love the fact that I can keep one foot firmly planted in clinical medicine, even though it's not direct patient care. Yeah. It allows me to use my medical background all day, every day. But at the same time, I've gained a skill set beyond conventional medicine. It's almost a de facto, MBA, as I sometimes like to say, in strategy and operations over the last 5+ years. And that's a very unique skill set that I really cherish, because I learn something every day on that side of my journey.
Yeah.
from a variety of different people.
Sure.
And that's the part that continues to drive me and kind of compel me to stay on this side of healthcare.
That's great. I was living in Canada before this, and there was a huge shortage of doctors.
Yeah.
Especially given the immigration that they were undertaking. Similar story in the UK. And there are people who are moving to Canada who are doctors in their home country, be it an India or a Syria or a Philippines, but they're not able to practice in Canada because they don't have the credentials and there's no easy process to recertify them. Do you ever see telehealth becoming a solution to that problem where the doctor would actually be in India or one of these places and administer medical advice to a country like Canada? Do you think that's ever a possibility given how acute the shortage of doctors is?
Yes and no. And I'm not trying to hedge. There's a reason I say yes and no.
Yeah.
No, let me start with the no. No, because I don't foresee stringent licensure and educational kind of pedigree, if you want to use that terminology, requirements changing in North America.
Right.
I don't foresee American and Canadian institutions accepting residency qualifications from other parts of the world very commonly. Even today, the FMG or foreign medical graduate journey from these countries that you mentioned into the US is one that is full of roadblocks and difficulties.
Yeah.
And you have to be at the absolute pinnacle of your educational performance in that home country in order to have a shot at making it at any institution here for residency. So that's why I don't think that aspect will change. However, with the advent of AI and with the advent of clinical technologies requiring a lot of back-end clinical services as well, aside from patient-facing front-end clinical services, you will find that a lot of these technologies will adopt physicians or clinicians who have been trained and even reside overseas to kind of develop these software and technology models. So that's why that is the yes part of my answer. So I think you will start seeing, you have already started seeing clinicians in India, serving as subject matter experts for AI models or technology models or clinical decision support models that are based in the US without providing direct patient care, because direct patient care is what requires the licensure. And so in a sense, yes, you are starting to see more and more of that, but I don't foresee those, even in the midst of a shortage, I don't foresee licensure aspects loosening for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great answer, and it certainly makes a lot of sense. I sometimes ask this question, but I think I already know the answer for you. Would you consider moving back to India, and if so, under what circumstances?
I mean, I usually am not one to say never. So I wouldn't say never, but I would say it's highly unlikely. Only because, to be very honest with you, I mean, I mentally and from an approach standpoint, I am probably more American today than I am Indian. For natural reasons, right? I've now spent 25 of my 40 years in the US.
Yeah.
2/3 of my life.
Your family is here.
My family is here, and most of my extended family is here.
Yeah.
And there's aspects of my cultural roots that, and linguistic roots, obviously, and culinary roots, and all of those things that reside in India, and always will. But from a practical aspect, everything, who I am and what I want to continue to become, the more practical roots, family roots and professional roots are in the US. So I don't foresee, unless it is an incredibly compelling personal or professional reason to move back to India, I don't foresee that happening in my case.
Yeah. And your wife has also spent most of her life here, right?
Yeah, my wife is of Indian origin, but she was, unlike me, was born and raised in the US. She was born and raised in Northern California, in the Bay Area.
One more reason that makes it less likely.
Ironically, though, I must say that she, based on some of her, extracurricular interests, she's a trained classical Bharatanatyam dancer, and to this day conducts classes and all of those things. So from that standpoint, she has her roots entrenched in various aspects of Indian culture more than
Yeah.
I do, ironically, in some ways.
I see that a lot actually. I see that kids who are born here to first generation immigrants,
Yeah.
they tend to have a lot more Indian interests and habits and hobbies than, because when we were growing up, India was trying to be like the West. They were
Exactly.
copying everything. This year I saw Halloween parties in India. Like, why? That makes no sense. But that's how it is.
She talks about this all the time. And then her main reason for this is, Mohit, you didn't need to reach to purposefully embrace that side of your existence and your
Right.
culture and your identity. It
Yeah.
came naturally to you by being there by osmosis.
Yeah.
In her case, she had to strive for it because, she and her family have been in the US since the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great point. It makes a lot of sense too. With my son now, we're in that situation. So we're throwing everything at him. We take him to cricket and baseball. We do Diwali and Halloween. Last year it was on the same day, I think one day apart. So we try our best to throw everything at him and see what sticks and then let that drive his interest. Let's move into our weekly segments now. So can our DJ spin the wheel, please? Very apt weekly segment for Mohit, and this one is called How's That? Most people from our part of the world have one or more distinct high point cricket memories. This could be a famous game on TV, it could be a memory of them playing cricket or watching a game from somewhere. We already talked about, the one at the Longhorn Cricket Club, but apart from that, what would be your most cherished cricket memory?
Yeah, if you put LCC memories aside, I would say, being an ardent or avid Indian cricket fan, most people would tell you older people would tell you it's the 83 World Cup.
Yeah.
People from our generation would say it's the 2011 World Cup.
Yeah.
In my case, I would say I still remain big on India's ability to perform well overseas, specifically in what we call SENA countries, South Africa, England, New Zealand, Australia.
Yeah.
And for me, India's biggest victory, and the one I got most pleasure from, was India's victory in Australia down under in 2020, 2021, especially after India got bowled out for 36 in Adelaide in that first test match.
Yeah.
And coming back up from that to win the series, I think was incredible. And for me, that was, I think, it remains one of India's, if not India's biggest achievement in cricket till date.
Oh, that's a great memory and one that has not been shared before. So thank you for sharing that with us. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for listening to Diaspora. We hope you enjoyed hearing Mohit's very interesting story. Remember to check out our show notes for links and more information about the topics that we talked about today. Diaspora is part of the Speaking Current network of shows and podcasts, all of which are dedicated to inspiring listeners to build lives of meaning, connection, and value. You can find the Speaking Current network of shows, including Diaspora, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. And lastly, if you know someone who has a story that can be shared on our show, feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media handles. We'll be back next week with another interesting story from the South Asian diaspora. Until then, take care and stay curious. And Mohit, thank you so much for coming. This was a lot of fun.
Aditya, thanks for having me and wishing you continued growth and success.
Thank you.